I am Del, the 3rd of March 3, a construction manager from Portland who trusted my family completely. Growing up, my sister Cassandra was my hero. We shared everything, or so I thought. When the bank called about missed payments on a $623,000 mortgage I never signed for, my world collapsed. The property address? A luxury home where my sister now lived. The signature on the loan documents? A forgery of mine. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button before I tell you how I discovered the ultimate family betrayal. I grew up in a modest, middle-class neighborhood in East Portland. Our house was nothing special, a 3-bedroom ranch style with faded blue siding that my father, Robert, was always promising to replace but never did. We had enough, but nothing extravagant. My mother, Barbara, worked as a school administrator, while my father ran a small accounting practice that served local businesses. My current life before this nightmare began was comfortable but simple. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland, drove a 5-year-old Subaru that was reliable if not flashy, and had managed to save a decent amount for my future. After 10 years working my way up from site laborer to construction manager at Pacific Northwest Builders, I earned a respectable $78,000 annually. I took pride in being financially responsible, having learned from watching my parents struggle with money during my childhood. My sister Cassandra is 3 years older than me, turning 36 last March. Even as kids, the difference between us was stark. While I was content playing with the same action figures for years, Cassandra always wanted the newest, the best, the most expensive toys. Our parents, especially our mother, seemed unable to say no to her. There was always money for her dance lessons, her school trips, her designer clothes, even when my father worked overtime to afford them. Cassandra went into real estate after dropping out of college, claiming she could make more money showing houses than she ever could with a degree. For a while, during the housing boom, she did well. She drove a BMW, wore expensive clothes, and lived in a sleek downtown apartment. But her spending always outpaced her income. She bought designer purses that cost thousands, took luxury vacations she couldn't afford, and ate at restaurants where the bill for one meal exceeded my weekly grocery budget. There were countless instances throughout our lives where Cassandra crossed boundaries. When we were teenagers, she borrowed my first car without permission and returned it with an empty tank and a dented fender. In college, she used my student ID to charge meals to my account when her own funds ran out. As adults, she borrowed $500 for what she called an emergency car repair, only for me to see her sporting new highlights and a designer jacket the next week. Our parents always made excuses for her. "Your sister just enjoys the finer things," my mother would say. Or Cassandra is building important connections in her career, my father would explain when she spent money she didn't have on client dinners. They never seemed to notice or care that her problems were self-created, or that their enabling made things worse. Despite everything, I maintained a relationship with my sister. We met for coffee once a month, exchanged gifts at holidays, and kept up appearances at family gatherings. I loved her, despite her flaws, but I had learned to keep a certain emotional distance and definite financial boundaries. 3 months before the mortgage nightmare began, Cassandra asked me for a loan of $20,000 to invest in a can't-miss opportunity with a client. I refused as gently as I could, suggesting she speak with a financial advisor instead. She stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving me with both our bills and a sense of relief that I had stood my ground. The next week, she acted as if nothing had happened, texting me memes and inviting me to Sunday dinner at our parents'. This was her pattern: the storm, then the sunshine, as if her outbursts and requests had never occurred. I went to dinner, we all pretended everything was fine, and life continued. Looking back, there were warning signs I missed. Mail that should have reached me went missing. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize that left no messages. A cousin mentioning that Cassandra had shown her photos of a beautiful new house she was moving into soon, but none of these raised alarms at the time. I was working 60-hour weeks supervising the construction of a new community center. My girlfriend of 2 years, Allison, had recently ended our relationship, saying I was emotionally unavailable. My closest friend had moved to Chicago for a job opportunity. My life was work, occasional family dinners, and quiet evenings at home. The perfect situation for someone to take advantage of my distraction and isolation. The last normal day I remember was a Tuesday. I paid my bills, called my mother to chat about her garden, and fell asleep watching a documentary about national parks. I had no idea that by Friday, everything I believed about my family and my place in it would be shattered beyond repair. The first sign something was wrong came on a rainy Saturday morning at Portland Motors. After months of research, I had decided to trade in my Subaru for a more fuel-efficient hybrid. My credit score had always been excellent, hovering around 800, and I had been pre-approved for loans through my credit union before. So when the finance manager, a balding man named Greg, with coffee stains on his tie, returned from his office with a confused expression, I wasn't initially concerned. "Mr. Wheeler, there seems to be an issue with your application," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "What kind of issue?" I asked. My credit score was 798 last month. He shuffled papers uncomfortably. "According to our system, your current score is 560, and you have a debt-to-income ratio that exceeds our lending guidelines by a significant margin." My stomach dropped. "That has to be a mistake. It shows here that you have a mortgage of $623,000 that originated 8 months ago. The payment history shows 30 days late twice, and the current payment is," he checked his screen again, "60 days past due." The dealership suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. People at nearby desks glanced over, sensing the uncomfortable conversation. My face burned with embarrassment. "That is absolutely incorrect," I said, my voice louder than intended. "I rent an apartment. I don't have a mortgage, let alone one for over $500,000. Greg nodded sympathetically, but firmly pushed a denial letter across the desk. "I suggest you request your credit reports and contact the lender directly. There's a number here for the bank holding the mortgage." I left the dealership in a daze, sitting in my old Subaru for 20 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. At home, I immediately logged into my credit monitoring service, which I hadn't checked in several months. The dashboard showed a glaring red alert and the shocking score Greg had mentioned. The credit report showed a mortgage through First Western Bank for exactly $623,450, opened 8 months prior. The property address was in West Hills, one of Portland's most exclusive neighborhoods. The report showed 2 30-day late payments and 1 60-day late payment currently outstanding. With shaking hands, I called the bank. After navigating an infuriating automated system and waiting on hold for 22 minutes, I reached a representative named Jennifer. "I need information about a mortgage that's apparently in my name, but I never applied for it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. After verifying my identity, Jennifer pulled up the account. "Yes, Mr. Wheeler, I see the mortgage here. It was originated on the 15th of August last year for a property at 4721 Hillcrest Drive. The loan is currently 63 days delinquent, with a payment of $4,278 due immediately to avoid foreclosure proceedings." "I never applied for this mortgage," I said, my heart pounding. "I never bought this property. This is fraud." "I see," Jennifer said, her voice shifting to a more formal tone. "In that case, you'd need to file a fraud claim. The documentation shows the loan was processed with your Social Security number, driver's license information, employment verification from Pacific Northwest Builders, and credit check authorization. The closing was conducted with a mobile notary." "Someone stole my identity," I insisted. "Can you tell me anything else about the application? Who was the real estate agent? Were there co-applicants? I'm afraid I can't provide that information over the phone for security reasons. You'll need to come into a branch with identification to file a fraud claim and request documentation. The nearest branch to your home address is on Hawthorne Boulevard." After hanging up, I searched for the property address online. It was a 4-bedroom Craftsman in West Hills with mountain views and a recently renovated interior according to the tax assessor's website. The estimated value was $790,000. I grabbed my keys and drove to the address, needing to see this house that was destroying my credit and financial future. As I turned onto Hillcrest Drive, the houses grew larger and more impressive, with manicured lawns and luxury cars in driveways. Number 4721 was a beautiful blue Craftsman with a wide front porch and professional landscaping, and parked in the driveway was Cassandra's white BMW. I sat in my car across the street, unable to process what I was seeing. My sister was living in a house purchased with a fraudulent mortgage in my name. My sister had stolen my identity, forged my signature, and left me responsible for over $600,000 of debt. The betrayal was so enormous, so complete, that I couldn't absorb it all at once. I felt physically ill, breaking into a cold sweat as my heart raced and my breathing became shallow. I recognized the symptoms of a panic attack, something I hadn't experienced since college finals. Through the windshield, I watched as Cassandra emerged from the front door in yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt, a green smoothie in hand, to collect a package from the porch. She looked completely at ease, happy even, standing on the porch of a home she was occupying under my stolen name while destroying my financial future. I drove away before she could notice me, my mind racing through options. Should I confront her immediately? Call the police first? Tell our parents? Every option seemed simultaneously necessary and impossible. By the time I returned to my apartment, one thing had become clear. The sister I thought I knew, the family I believed I had, were illusions. Whatever came next would forever change us all. I spent the night researching identity theft, mortgage fraud, and the potential consequences. The more I learned, the worse it looked. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime with penalties, including prison time. Identity theft involving this amount of money carried serious charges as well. If I reported it officially, Cassandra could face years in prison. But if I didn't report it, I would be responsible for a $623,000 mortgage. My credit was already severely damaged. If foreclosure proceedings began, it would devastate my financial future for a decade or more. There was no scenario where this ended without significant pain. I decided to confront Cassandra first, to hear her explanation face to face before making any legal decisions. I texted her the next morning, asking if I could stop by her place that afternoon to discuss something important. She replied immediately with, "Sure. Come by around 2. I want to show you my new place anyway." The casual tone, the complete lack of guilt or concern, made my blood boil. She wanted to show me her new place, the one she had fraudulently purchased using my identity. The audacity was breathtaking. I arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, a manila envelope containing my credit report and the loan denial in hand. Cassandra opened the door with a broad smile, wearing an expensive-looking silk blouse and designer jeans. "Delmar, finally. I've been wanting to give you the grand tour for ages," she said, pulling me into a hug I couldn't bring myself to return. The house was even more impressive inside. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath high ceilings with recessed lighting. The open-concept main floor featured a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and high-end stainless appliances. Through large windows, I could see a beautifully landscaped backyard with a stone patio and fire pit. "What do you think? Isn't it gorgeous?" she asked, practically bouncing with pride as she led me through the living room with its gas fireplace and built-in bookshelves. "How can you afford this place, Cassandra?" I asked, my voice flat. Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, the real estate market has been really good to me lately. And I got a great deal because I knew the listing agent." She quickly changed the subject. "Let me show you the primary suite upstairs. The bathroom has heated floors and a soaking tub that will make you weep." I remained rooted in place. "The bank says this house was purchased with a mortgage in my name. A mortgage am now 60 days late on." Cassandra froze, her back to me. For several seconds, she said nothing. When she turned, her expression had transformed into one of confused innocence. "What are you talking about? That's crazy," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I opened the manila envelope and held out the credit report. "I was denied a car loan yesterday because my credit score has plummeted. Because there's a $623,000 mortgage in my name for this exact address." She glanced at the papers but didn't take them. "There must be some mistake. Maybe it's a computer error Or, "Stop lying," I interrupted, my voice breaking. "Your car is in the driveway of a house with a mortgage in my name that I never applied for. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think the bank wouldn't contact me when payments were missed?" Her expression shifted again, this time to something calculating. She took the papers from my hand and scanned them quickly. "Okay, yes. The mortgage is in your name," she finally admitted. "But it's not what you're thinking. Please, explain what possible explanation there could be besides you committing identity theft and mortgage fraud." She sighed dramatically and sank onto her white leather sofa. "My credit was shot after the divorce from Trevor. You know he left me with all those debts. I tried to get approved for a mortgage on my own, but no bank would touch me. This house came on the market, and it was perfect, and it was going to be snapped up immediately. So you used my name and social security number without my knowledge or consent," I said flatly. "I was going to tell you eventually," she insisted. "I just needed to get into the house first. And look," she gestured around, "it's a great investment. The property value has already increased by $50,000. How did you even get approved?" "They would have needed my signature, my ID, employment verification." She looked away. "I have access to Dad's office equipment for work sometimes. And I know your social security number from when we were both on that family cell phone plan years ago. The employment verification was just a matter of creating a letterhead and signing it." The mobile notary hardly glanced at the ID. The calculated nature of her fraud stunned me. "You forged my signature and created fake documents. Do you understand that's a felony?" "Multiple felonies? Don't be so dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's just paperwork. I'm the one making the payments and living here." "It doesn't affect you, except you're not making the payments," I shouted, finally losing my composure. "The loan is 60 days delinquent. My credit score has dropped over 200 points. I was publicly humiliated at a car dealership yesterday. For the first time, she looked slightly contrite. "I've had some cash flow issues the past couple months. A few deals fell through, but I'm expecting a big commission check next week, and it'll catch up on everything, I promise." "And what about next month? And the month after that?" "This isn't a one-time fix, Cassandra. This is a 30-year mortgage for over $600,000 in my name." I know, she said, standing up and pacing. "Look, I was planning to refinance once my credit improves. 6 months. A year. Tops. Then he'll get it out of your name completely." "Your credit is bad because you don't pay your bills," I pointed out. "What makes you think that'll change in 6 months?" Her expression hardened. "I have always helped you when you needed it," she said, her voice taking on a wounded tone. "When have you ever helped me financially?" I asked incredulously. "Family isn't just about money, Delmar. Remember when Allison broke up with you? Who brought over ice cream and listened to you mope all night? When you were sick with pneumonia last year, who brought you groceries?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you seriously comparing basic sibling decency to committing felony fraud that could send you to prison and destroy my financial future?" "We're family," she said, as if that explained and excused everything. "We help each other. That's what we do." When she saw this wasn't working, her tactics shifted. Tears filled her eyes. "I just wanted a nice place to live after everything Trevor put me through. You know how he cheated on me, how he left me with nothing. I needed a fresh start." The manipulation was so transparent I almost laughed. "So your solution was to commit a crime against me? Your own brother? I was just borrowing your good credit. I was going to fix everything before you ever found out. But I did find out because you haven't been making payments. That was one mistake. I got behind, but I'll fix it. Please, Delmar, if you report this, you'll ruin my life. I'll lose my real estate license. I could go to jail." "You should have thought about that before you stole my identity," I said, moving toward the door. "I need to think about what I'm going to do. But you need to understand the seriousness of what you've done." She followed me, grabbing my arm. "You're not going to tell Mom and Dad, are you? It would break their hearts." I pulled away from her. "Don't contact me for a few days. I need time to figure out how to handle this." As I walked to my car, she called after me. "Delmar, Please, we can work this out. Don't do anything hasty." Driving away from my sister's fraudulently obtained dream home, I felt nothing but numbness. The sister I thought I knew would never have done something so calculated, so deeply harmful to me. But perhaps that sister had never existed at all. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, alternating between rage, disbelief, and profound sadness. I called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything besides the betrayal and the looming financial disaster. By Tuesday evening, I had decided I needed to tell my parents before taking any legal action. They deserved to know what their daughter had done, and perhaps they could help convince Cassandra to take responsibility for her actions. I called my father first, asking if he and my mother could meet me for dinner that night. Something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency, because he didn't ask questions, just agreed to meet at their house at 7. They were both waiting in the living room when I arrived, concern evident on their faces. My mother immediately asked if I was ill, or if something had happened at work. "It's about Cassandra," I said, settling into the armchair across from them, "and a serious legal and financial situation she's created." I explained everything as calmly and factually as I could. The mortgage, the identity theft, the forged documents, the missed payments, and my confrontation with Cassandra. I showed them the credit report and loan denial as evidence. Throughout my explanation, their expressions shifted from concern to confusion to something I couldn't quite identify. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Are you absolutely certain about all this?" he asked. "It seems hard to believe Cassandra would do something so extreme." The doubt in his voice was like a slap. "Yes, I'm certain. She admitted everything to my face. She forged my signature, used my social security number, and created fake employment verification. She bought a house using my identity, and now she's not making the payments." My mother twisted her wedding ring nervously. "But surely there's been some misunderstanding. Cassandra would never intentionally harm you. She committed multiple felonies in my name," I said, my frustration mounting. "There's no misunderstanding." My father leaned forward. "What exactly are you planning to do about this?" "I need to file a police report and contact the bank to report the fraud. It's the only way to get the mortgage removed from my credit." My parents exchanged glances, and my stomach sank as I began to understand their reaction. "Delmar," my mother said gently, "reporting your sister to the police seems very extreme. This is family. Surely we can handle this internally." I stared at her in disbelief. "Handle what internally? A $600,000 fraudulent mortgage? Felony identity theft?" "Your sister made a mistake," my father said. "A serious one. Yes, but sending her to jail won't solve anything." "So what do you suggest?" I asked. "That I just accept responsibility for a mortgage I never took out? Let my credit be destroyed? Pay for a house I don't live in? Of course not," my mother soothed. "But there's got to be a middle ground. Cassandra told us she's expecting a large commission soon. She can catch up on the payments and then work on refinancing." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You already knew," I said, looking between them. "She called you after I left her house." Neither of them denied it. My father shifted uncomfortably. "She was very upset. She made a terrible error in judgment. But she's your sister. She loves you. People who love you don't commit crimes against you," I said. "The important thing now is to keep this within the family," my father continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "If this becomes a legal matter, it could affect your sister's career permanently, not to mention the impact on our family reputation in the community." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your concern is for Cassandra's career and the family reputation? What about the impact on my life?" "We're concerned about everyone," my mother insisted, "including you. But involving the police and courts will only make everything worse." "Worse for who?" I demanded. "Because right now, I'm the only one suffering consequences for something I didn't do." The conversation continued in circles for another hour. My parents acknowledged that Cassandra had done something very wrong but maintained that legal consequences were unnecessary and vindictive. They proposed solutions that invariably involved me accepting some level of responsibility for the fraud committed against me, while shielding Cassandra from the natural consequences of her actions. By the time I left their house, I understood with painful clarity that in the choice between their children, they had chosen Cassandra. Again, as they always had. 3 days later, they invited me to dinner at their house, mentioning casually that Cassandra would be joining us. I almost declined, but decided facing the situation directly was necessary. I arrived to find the dining room table set with the good china and my mother's special occasion lasagna in the center. Cassandra was already seated, looking contrite, but with an undertone of smugness I recognized from childhood confrontations, where she knew our parents would ultimately take her side. The dinner began with strained small talk about the weather and my father's golf game. Finally, my mother cleared her throat and reached for both my hand and Cassandra's across the table. "We've been thinking about this situation," she began, "and we believe we've found a solution that works for everyone." My father nodded. "Cassandra has admitted she made a serious mistake. She should never have taken out a mortgage in your name without discussing it with you first. The deliberate minimization of felony fraud to a mistake and without discussing it with you made my jaw clench. I've already made arrangements to catch up on the missed payments," Cassandra added quickly. "My commission check cleared today, and I made a payment this afternoon." "That's good," I acknowledged. "But it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The mortgage is still fraudulently in my name. We have a proposal," my father said. "Cassandra will make all the payments going forward, on time, without exception. In return, you won't report the fraud to the authorities." "And what happens when she misses payments again?" I asked. "Or decides the house is too expensive and walks away from it entirely?" "I won't," Cassandra promised fervently. "I've learned my lesson. Your sister has offered to sign a document taking full financial responsibility," my father continued. "It would be a private agreement between the two of you, a private agreement that would have zero legal standing against a mortgage that is officially in my name," I pointed out. "In 6 months, I'll refinance," Cassandra insisted. "My credit score is already improving." "We thought you might also consider being added to the deed," my mother suggested. "That way, you'll have an ownership interest in the property. It could actually be a good investment for you." I stared at her, stunned. "So, your solution is for me to become an accomplice to the fraud? After the fact? To tie myself legally to a property purchased through identity theft?" "We're just trying to find a workable solution," my father said, his voice hardening. "One that doesn't destroy your sister's life and bring shame to this family." "What about my life?" I asked quietly. "What about the shame of knowing my family thinks so little of me that they expect me to accept being the victim of a crime committed by my own sister?" "You're being melodramatic," Cassandra said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like I physically hurt you." "Financial abuse is still abuse," I said, "and the betrayal of trust is a kind of emotional harm that I don't think any of you understand." "We understand that family forgives," my mother said firmly. "Family protects each other." "Apparently that protection only extends to Cassandra," I replied. "Not to me." The dinner deteriorated from there. My parents became increasingly insistent that I be reasonable and think of the family. Cassandra alternated between tearful apologies and subtle insinuations that I was overreacting to what she continued to characterize as a simple mistake. By dessert, the battle lines were clearly drawn. My parents and sister on one side, united in their belief that the fraud should be handled privately in a way that protected Cassandra from consequences. Me on the other, increasingly certain that I could not trust any of them to truly have my best interests at heart. I left with a hollow feeling in my chest, knowing that whatever decision I made would likely cost me my family. The question was whether that was a price I was willing to pay for justice and self-respect. The morning after the disastrous family dinner, I called my supervisor at Pacific Northwest Builders and requested a week of personal leave. Randy had been my boss for 5 years and knew me as a reliable employee who rarely took time off. He granted the request without pressing for details. With time to focus, I began methodically researching my options. I consulted with a financial advisor named Michael Reeves, who specialized in identity theft cases. His office was in a small professional building downtown, with credentials on the wall and a no-nonsense manner that I appreciated. Based on what you've told me, you have a clear case of identity theft and mortgage fraud, he said after reviewing my documentation. The fact that the perpetrator is your sister doesn't change the legal situation, though it certainly complicates the personal aspects. What are my options? I asked. Legally, you have only one viable option if you want to remove this debt from your name and repair your credit, he said. You need to file a police report for identity theft, report the fraud to the 3 credit bureaus, and file a fraud claim with the mortgage lender. And if I don't do that, then the mortgage remains your legal responsibility. All missed payments, potential foreclosure, everything affects your credit and financial standing. The bank can pursue you for payment regardless of any private agreement you might have with your sister. My parents want me to handle this without involving authorities, I explained. Michael leaned back in his chair. That's a common reaction when family members are involved. But ask yourself this: if a stranger had stolen your identity and taken out a mortgage in your name, would you hesitate to report it? The question clarified things for me. By that afternoon, I had made my decision. The Portland Police Department detective assigned to my case was a woman in her 40s named Detective Sandra Patel. Her office was cluttered but organized, with case files stacked in neat piles and family photos on her desk. Identity theft within families is more common than most people realize, she told me after taking my statement and copying my documentation. The perpetrators count on the victim's reluctance to report family members. Will my sister go to jail? I asked. The question that had been haunting me despite my anger. I can't predict the outcome of the investigation or potential prosecution, Detective Patel said carefully. But mortgage fraud, involving this amount of money, is a serious offense. It will ultimately be up to the district attorney's office to determine charges once our investigation is complete. She explained the process moving forward. The police would investigate, gather evidence, and potentially forward the case to prosecutors. I would need to cooperate with both the police investigation and the bank's fraud department. My next stop was First Western Bank. Their fraud department representative, a serious man named Thomas Griffith, took me through the process of filing a formal fraud claim. I provided a copy of the police report, signed affidavits stating I had not applied for or authorized the mortgage, and submitted to fingerprinting for comparison against the loan documents. How long will this process take? I asked. Fraud investigations of this nature typically take 45 to 60 days, he explained. During that time, the account will be flagged and frozen, meaning no further action will be taken regarding missed payments or foreclosure proceedings. And if the investigation confirms fraud, the mortgage will be removed from your credit report, and your credit score should begin to recover within 30 to 60 days after that. The lender will pursue the responsible party for the outstanding loan amount. As I left the bank, my phone showed 6 missed calls and 11 text messages from Cassandra. I read the first few. The bank just called me. What have you done? Please call me immediately. You can't do this to me. They said the account is frozen pending a fraud investigation. I silenced my phone and drove home. By evening, the calls had expanded to include both my parents. I finally answered my father's call, bracing myself. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded without preamble. The bank called your sister today saying there's a fraud investigation on her mortgage. I filed a police report and reported the fraud to the bank, I said calmly. As the victim of identity theft, that was my right. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice shook with anger. Your sister could face criminal charges. This could ruin her entire life. She ruined her own life when she decided to commit multiple felonies. I never thought you capable of such vindictiveness, he said. Your mother is beside herself. Cassandra hasn't stopped crying since the bank called. I'm sorry you're upset, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I have to protect myself. No one else in this family seems willing to. If you continue with this, my father said, his voice cold, you are no longer welcome in this family. Your mother and I cannot support someone who would send their own sister to jail out of spite. The ultimatum hurt, but didn't surprise me. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because it's the only way to protect my financial future from someone who has already shown she has no respect for me or the law. You have 24 hours to withdraw the fraud claim and police report. After that, don't bother contacting us again." He hung up before I could respond. Minutes later, my mother called. Her approach was different tears, emotional appeals, and finally, a bombshell. "The stress of this situation has affected my heart condition," she said, her voice weak. "Dr. Peterson is concerned about my blood pressure. If this continues, I could have another episode." The manipulation was so transparent it almost took my breath away. My mother had a mild heart arrhythmia that was well controlled with medication. Dr. Peterson had told us himself that it was not life-threatening, yet she was now implying that my actions might kill her. "I suggest you rest and try to stay calm," I said. "This situation is stressful for everyone, but it's not of my creation." "How can you be so cold?" she whispered. "I'm your mother, and I'm your son. The one being criminally victimized by your daughter. The one you're asking to sacrifice his financial future to protect someone who committed fraud." After ending that call, I turned off my phone completely. The silence was both a relief and achingly lonely. The next day, I received calls from my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, and 2 cousins, all urging me to reconsider my harsh actions against Cassandra. It became clear that my parents had mobilized the extended family, presenting a version of events that cast me as vindictive and Cassandra as a well-meaning sister who had made a minor error in judgment. The isolation was beginning to take a toll when I discovered an online support forum for identity theft victims. There, I connected with others who understood the violation and betrayal I was experiencing. One member, Victor, had experienced identity theft by his brother and became something of a mentor, offering practical advice and emotional support. The hardest part for me was accepting that protecting myself wasn't selfish, Victor told me during one of our conversations. "We're taught that family comes first, but that shouldn't mean allowing yourself to be harmed." 2 weeks into the investigation, Detective Patel called with an update. "We've uncovered evidence that your sister diverted your mail to a P.O. box she rented 6 months before the mortgage was initiated. We also have the notary's statement that the ID presented at closing appears to have been altered." The calculated nature of Cassandra's actions continued to shock me. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a carefully planned criminal enterprise spanning months. A few days later, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Cassandra. The letter suggested that if I withdrew my fraud claims, Cassandra would agree to a structured plan to refinance the mortgage within 6 months. If I refused, the letter hinted at a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress. I forwarded the letter to Detective Patel, who confirmed what I suspected. The threat was empty, an intimidation tactic that actually strengthened the case against my sister by demonstrating consciousness of guilt. As the investigation proceeded, I found myself grieving the family I thought I had while simultaneously building a new support network of friends who truly valued my well-being. Victor introduced me to others from the support forum who lived in Portland, and we began meeting weekly for coffee. My supervisor, Randy, noticed my distraction at work and, rather than reprimanding me, offered flexibility and support. "Whatever you're going through," he said, "remember that your worth isn't defined by your family." His words, simple but profound, helped me find the strength to continue the path I had chosen, despite the pain and isolation it entailed. 3 weeks into the investigation, I received a text from my father that surprised me. "Your mother and I would like to meet for dinner tomorrow to discuss a resolution. Cassandra will attend. 7 p.m. at Riverside Grill." I was immediately suspicious. Our last conversation had ended with an ultimatum, and essentially disowning me. Why the sudden desire for reconciliation? I consulted with both Victor and Detective Patel before responding. "This could be a genuine attempt to make amends," Victor suggested. "Or it could be another manipulation tactic." Detective Patel was more direct. "Just be aware that anything you say could be used against you if they're recording the conversation. Stick to facts, don't make agreements, and don't sign anything." I agreed to the dinner, but decided to prepare thoroughly. I called my bank's fraud attorney, Martin Fields, who had been assigned to my case, and asked for advice. In these situations, Family members often try to pressure victims into withdrawing complaints or signing documents accepting responsibility, he warned. Don't sign anything, no matter how much emotional pressure they apply. He offered to review the current status of the fraud investigation, which had progressed significantly. The bank had confirmed that the employment verification documents were forged, the notary's signature appeared to be fraudulent, and several mortgage payments had been made from an account belonging to Cassandra before the payment stopped. Armed with this information and copies of the most damning evidence, I felt as prepared as possible for whatever the dinner might bring. Riverside Grill was one of the most expensive restaurants in Portland, featuring panoramic views of the Willamette River and a wine list that started at $60 a bottle. The choice of venue seemed calculated to create an atmosphere of wealth and status, values I knew my parents and sister prioritized. I arrived exactly at 7 to find my family already seated at a corner table with a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. My mother was wearing her pearl necklace reserved for special occasions. My father had on his custom-tailored suit. Cassandra wore a designer dress I recognized from a magazine ad. Delmar, my mother rose to hug me, her perfume enveloping me. I'm so glad you came. My father offered a stiff handshake while Cassandra gave a subdued nod. Her expression, unreadable. Would you like some champagne? My mother asked. We're celebrating? Celebrating what? I asked cautiously. A new beginning, my father declared. The end of this unfortunate situation. I declined the champagne and ordered water instead, wanting to keep a clear head. The server took our dinner orders: expensive steaks for my father and Cassandra, Chilean sea bass for my mother, and the simplest pasta dish on the menu for me. I had no appetite. Once the server departed, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes glistened with tears that I couldn't tell were genuine or strategic. Family is the most important thing in life, she began. No matter what happens, we're bound by blood and love. These past weeks have been unbearable, knowing my children are at odds. My father nodded solemnly. We've all had time to reflect on this situation. Mistakes were made, serious ones. But now, it's time to come together and move forward. I remained silent, waiting to hear exactly what they were proposing. Cassandra spoke next, her voice contrite. Delmar, I want to apologize from the bottom of my heart. What I did was wrong. I violated your trust, and I put you in a terrible position. I was desperate and made a terrible choice. But I never meant to hurt you. The apology sounded rehearsed, but contained the first acknowledgement that she'd done something truly wrong, rather than simply making a minor error. Cassandra has agreed to take full responsibility for her actions, my father continued. She's prepared to make this right. How exactly? I asked. My mother squeezed my hand. She's arranged to catch up on all missed mortgage payments and is committed to making every payment on time going forward. She's also agreed to refinance the mortgage into her own name within 6 months. And in the meantime? I asked. Well, the mortgage would remain in your name temporarily, my father admitted. But Cassandra has signed a notarized document taking full financial responsibility. I gently withdrew my hand from my mother's. And what about the police report and fraud investigation? The mood at the table shifted perceptibly. My father's jaw tightened. That would need to be withdrawn, of course. We can't move forward with that hanging over the family. For the sake of everyone involved, my mother added tearfully. Think of your sister's future. Think of our family name in the community. Think of your mother's health, my father said pointedly. This stress isn't good for her heart. I looked at each of their faces, seeing the confidence behind their eyes. They truly believed this dinner, this orchestrated scene of family reconciliation, would be enough to make me abandon my pursuit of justice and protection. Before I respond, I said calmly, I want to be clear about what you're asking. You want me to withdraw a legitimate fraud report for a crime committed against me, leave a fraudulent mortgage in my name based on nothing but Cassandra's promise to refinance eventually, and pretend none of this ever happened. Is that correct? That's a very negative way of putting it, my father objected. We're asking you to handle this as a family matter rather than a legal one. For all our sakes, my mother added. We just want peace. Cassandra nodded earnestly. I promise I'll make this right, Delmar. You can trust me. Something about her confident assertion, you can trust me after everything she'd done, crystallized my thoughts. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a folder containing the documents I'd brought. I received an update on the fraud investigation today, I said, sliding the folder across the table. "I'd like you all to take a look." My father opened the folder with a frown. Inside was a copy of the police report, the bank's preliminary fraud findings, and a letter from the bank's attorney outlining the potential charges against Cassandra. "The investigation has uncovered that Cassandra rented a P.O. box 6 months before taking out the mortgage and redirected my mail there," I explained as they read. "They found evidence that she created fake employment verification documents using equipment from Dad's office. The notary has signed a statement that the ID presented at closing appears to have been altered, and the mortgage payments that were made came directly from Cassandra's personal account, proving she knew exactly what she was doing." The color drained from Cassandra's face as she read the documents. My father's expression hardened to stone. My mother began to cry in earnest. "The bank and police haven't yet decided whether to pursue criminal charges or simply civil penalties," I continued. "That decision will likely be made in the next 2 weeks. "You had no right," Cassandra began, but I cut her off. "I had every right. I am the victim of multiple felonies committed by someone I trusted. Someone who is supposed to love me. This is vindictiveness, pure and simple," my father snapped. "Your sister made a mistake, and you're determined to destroy her life over it." "A mistake?" I repeated. "A mistake is forgetting to return a borrowed book. This was calculated identity theft and fraud, involving over $600,000. If you go through with this," my mother sobbed, "it will tear this family apart forever." I looked at her sadly. This family was torn apart the moment Cassandra decided to steal my identity, and the damage was completed when you and Dad chose to defend her actions rather than protect me. "So that's it?" my father demanded. "You'll send your own sister to jail? Break your mother's heart? Destroy our family name?" "I didn't do any of those things," I said firmly. "Cassandra committed crimes with full knowledge of the potential consequences. You chose to prioritize her welfare over mine, despite the fact that she was the perpetrator and I was the victim. If anyone is responsible for what's happening now, it's not me." Cassandra, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly slammed her hand on the table, causing glasses to jump and heads at nearby tables to turn. "You selfish bastard," she hissed, all pretense of remorse evaporating. "After everything I've done for you over the years, this is how you repay me? By ruining my life over a stupid loan?" "What exactly have you done for me, Cassandra?" I asked quietly. "Name one significant time you've sacrificed your interests for mine." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce an example. "I think we're done here," I said, standing up. "I need to respect myself enough to not allow people to harm me without consequences. Even if those people are family. If you walk out that door," my father said, his voice deadly quiet, "you are no longer our son." I looked at him for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time the conditional nature of his love. "If protecting your daughter from the consequences of felony fraud is more important to you than my well-being, then perhaps I never truly was." As I walked away from the table, I heard my mother call my name, and Cassandra began to cry loudly, drawing attention from other diners. I didn't look back. Each step toward the door felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying my entire life. The weeks following the restaurant confrontation were both painful and liberating. True to his word, my father ceased all contact. My mother sent occasional text messages that alternated between guilt trips and health updates, but I maintained firm boundaries, responding only to direct questions and ignoring emotional manipulation. The fraud investigation concluded exactly as Detective Patel had predicted. First Western Bank removed the fraudulent mortgage from my credit report, and my score began a slow recovery. The bank pursued civil action against Cassandra for the full amount of the mortgage, placing a lien against the house. The district attorney offered Cassandra a plea deal. She would plead guilty to 1 count of identity theft and 1 count of mortgage fraud, receive 3 years probation, pay restitution for all costs associated with the investigation, and complete 500 hours of community service. If she violated probation or failed to make restitution payments, she would face 18 months in state prison. She took the deal, avoiding jail time but acquiring a felony record that resulted in the suspension of her real estate license. According to a mutual cousin who still spoke to me, she was forced to sell the house to pay the bank and now worked as a receptionist at a small property management company owned by a former colleague who took pity on her. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one with better security and a doorman who screened visitors. I changed all my passwords, set up fraud alerts on my accounts, and became vigilantly protective of my personal information. The vulnerability I felt knowing how easily my identity had been stolen lingered long after the practical matters were resolved. My relationship with my parents remained severed, a loss that brought both grief and unexpected relief. The constant need to meet their expectations, to compete with Cassandra's golden child status, had been a burden I carried so long. I had stopped noticing its weight until it was gone. 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, I received a surprising email from my father's sister, Aunt Linda. She had initially sided with my parents, but had since learned more details about what Cassandra had done. "I owe you an apology," she wrote. "I made judgments based on incomplete information. What your sister did was wrong, and your parents' response was equally wrong. If you're open to it, I'd like to rebuild our relationship." Linda became an unexpected source of support and connection to my extended family. Through her, I learned that opinions had shifted as the full story emerged, with several relatives expressing quiet support for my actions. At work, my focus and performance improved without the constant drain of family drama. Randy, my supervisor, recommended me for a promotion to senior project manager, a position that came with a substantial raise and more creative control over projects. I made a conscious effort to build stronger friendships, recognizing that I had always kept people at a distance, perhaps unconsciously modeling my family's emotional patterns. Victor and the other identity theft survivors remained supportive, and I began volunteering once a month with an organization that helped victims navigate the complex recovery process. Through one of these volunteer sessions, I met Natalie, a cybersecurity specialist who had helped several victims secure their digital identities after theft. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship and eventually into dating. Unlike Allison, who had found me emotionally unavailable, Natalie appreciated the openness and vulnerability that my experience had paradoxically taught me to embrace. Therapy proved invaluable in processing not just the identity theft, but the lifetime of family dynamics that had created fertile ground for such a profound betrayal. Dr. Hernandez, a compassionate but direct therapist, helped me recognize patterns I'd never consciously acknowledged. "Your family operated on a clear hierarchy," she observed during one session. "Your sister at the top, your parents in the middle, and you at the bottom. The expectation was always that you would sacrifice for those above you, while they were never expected to sacrifice for you." This framework helped me understand why my refusal to accept Cassandra's fraud had seemed so shocking to my family. I had violated the unspoken rules that had governed our relationships my entire life. 15 months after discovering the fraudulent mortgage, my credit score had recovered enough that I was able to secure a loan for a small but charming 2-bedroom condo in a neighborhood I had always admired. The day I signed the legitimate mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of reclaiming my financial identity. On the 1-year anniversary of filing the police report, I wrote letters to my parents and Cassandra that I never sent. The exercise wasn't about reconnection, but about articulating my feelings clearly for my own benefit. In Cassandra's letter, I explained the depth of the betrayal and why I could not forgive without genuine remorse and changed behavior. To my parents, I expressed both grief at their conditional love and gratitude for the hard lesson that had ultimately set me free from unhealthy family patterns. 2 years after the fraud discovery, I received a wedding invitation from a cousin, with a note indicating that my parents and Cassandra would be attending. After careful consideration and discussion with both Natalie and Dr. Hernandez, I decided to attend with Natalie as my support. The encounter was brief and awkward, polite nods from my father, a tearful hug from my mother that I accepted but didn't return, and Cassandra avoiding me entirely. But I left the event feeling strong in a way I couldn't have imagined 2 years earlier. The most profound change wasn't external but internal. I had learned to value myself enough to establish boundaries. I had discovered that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but necessary. And perhaps most importantly, I had realized that family is defined not by blood, but by mutual respect, support, and love that doesn't come with conditions. If you're watching this and struggling with family betrayal or identity theft, please know that protecting yourself isn't selfish. Your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to sacrifice for people who harm you. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with family. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is not just okay, it's essential. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into.